Appalachia. Everybody in the world has a reaction to that word. Makes folks think everything from beautiful mountaintop views, dangerous hillbillies running through the woods with a rifle in one hand and a jug of shine in the other, to trailer parks, drugs, and blame near everything in between. The Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountains in the world. They once towered 30,000 feet into the air. They stretch along the eastern U.S. from Canada through 14 states all the way to Louisiana. The folks live in these mountains have seen and endured enough things to have happened to them to make a preacher cuss. Hello, I'm Larry Bentley, and I was born in the Appalachian Mountains of southwest Virginia. And I was raised there by folks who lived for generations right there in the heart of them old mountains. Come with me and we'll take a look at some of the odd, awful, and legendary things that have happened within my beloved mountains, and we'll be traveling around a bit, looking through the eyes of an Appalachian at some of the crazy that spread itself around outside the area as well. Welcome to Season 6 of Appalachian Murder, History, and Legend. Howdy, my good friends. Hope you're doing well today and getting after it. Thank you so much for stopping by, and happy Easter to y'all. Let's remember the reason for the season and don't let that big bunny do what he do. First off, before we get out in the woods too far on this one, let me tell you about it. Our friend Alfred Dockery from Blue Ridge True Crime website. He started him up a podcast that I've been following, and I think you'd like it too. That's called Blue Ridge True Crime, and it's the podcast, same title, and you can find it pretty much wherever you find this one. So run on over and give him a listen and tell him I sent you. Now, today we're leaving the pine-scented hollers of the southern Appalachians for the soot-covered cobblestone of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Now, a lot of folks think that Pittsburgh, it ain't no Appalachian Mountains, and they'd be broke-ass wrong about it. It sure enough is firmly ensconced in the Appalachian region of Pennsylvania, whether folks like it or, well, they learn to, one or the other. Anyway, back in 1901 and everything that I read about, folks said that Pittsburgh was pretty much a giant iron forge chimney where the air was about 40% smoke and the people were about 70% barking moonbat crazy. Now, today we're talking about the Biddle Boys, Jack and Ed. Them two were known as the Chloroform Gang, and they were about as sharp as a baked potato. If stupidity was a crime, these two would have been on death row before they ever walked out of the house. But what they lacked in brains, they supposedly made up for in good looks. Now, they were thought of as handsome. I do use that term loosely, consider that I'm a walking example of what handsome ain't. Because of their dashing good looks, they became heartthrobs in every housewife in the tri-state area. But like I say, seems like I'm the one that collects the bad decisions, and this ain't no different. This is a story about a series of bad decisions, so poorly planned it makes a box of dog hair look like a genius. So call your mom and them over, tell them to come on over and set a spell, and let me tell you about this hot mess. Like we already said, Jack and Ed Biddle weren't exactly criminal masterminds. They were more like the guys who'd try to rob a bank and realize that they forgot the gun and held the bag too to put the money in. They earned the name the Chloroform Gang because their preferred method of robbery was sneaking into houses and trying to knock people out with rags soaked with chemicals that they'd mixed together in some kind of bathtub type chloroform. Now, using chloroform, if you was actually able to mix it up from whatever you could get your hands on back in 1901, is pretty tricky business to start with. It ain't like the movies where you go in there and get a quick little whiff and instantly go to sleep for 8 hours. Usually you just end up making the house smell like a hospital and waking up the homeowner, who then proceeds to beat you like a drum with a fireplace poker until you don't know up from down as you try to get the hell out of the house so he'll stop slugging you. How do I know this? Well, I learned that by reading about these two geniuses doing just that. Now, instead of learning better than to do shit like that, accepting that they were just too dumb for that kind of work, just as soon as they healed up and could see straight again, or at least as straight as they could see to start with, they're right back out and into it again. On April 12th, 1901, the deadheads on mopsticks decided to rob a grocery store owned by a feller named Thomas Caney. Now, during the process of not having any kind of plan, they ended up shooting and killing Mr. Caney, and just happened to take out a police officer who showed up to help too. I reckon they remembered the gun that time, and then ran off without so much as a dime. Now, in the mountains, we call that digging your own grave, jumping in and pulling the dirt in over yourself. They were caught, tried, and sentenced to hang in the Allegheny County Jail. Now, over with and everything but the crying, I guess, right? Well, not so fast. We're just getting the ball rolling on these two. This is the part where the story gets what you might call Appalachian weird. Even though these boys were killers, not because they planned it, but because they were just too dumb to run and not shoot, they had what the papers called majestic personalities, or magnetic personalities. Majestic and magical, I guess, would be probably a better word for that. Yeah, let's call it a magical personality. Now, every day, dozens of women would line up outside the jail and bring them flowers, candy, and silk handkerchiefs while they just stood in their cells letting the poor women gawk at them. I reckon if you're a lady in 1901, your husband walks around smelling like iron slag, whiskey, and disappointment, a bad boy in a jail cell starts to look like a romantic lead. But of all the ones to fall for him, the one that fell the hardest was named Kate Soffel. Kate was the wife of the jail warden, Peter Soffel. She was a good Christian woman, or at least that's what she told her mirror every morning, and anybody else that would listen, for that matter. She used to go down into the death row and section of the jail there and read the Bible to the inmates. Now, most folks read the Bible to find salvation, but Kate was looking for something just a little bit more spicy. She fell head over heels for Ed Biddle, and Ed might have been dull as a marble, but he knew a useful idiot when he saw one. He started whispering sweet nothings through the bars, telling Kate that he was innocent and that the only thing that could save him was her pure heart, and she swallowed it hook, line, and sinker, along with about anything else he could have bit down on. Kind of makes me wonder what he might have been sticking through them bars anyway. She didn't just bring him the good book. She had it had her so worked up that she was bringing him hacksaws. She must have been carving out a few pages of the good book and stuffing them in there for that, I guess. Now, on January 30th of 1902, a record blizzard hit the town, and I mean one that'd make a polar bear run for cover. But now, being that this story wrote itself, well, I just stood there in stunned amazement while it did. Well, yeah, you guessed it. That's the night that these Einsteins decided that it would be a good idea to break out of jail and go for it. So, right there in the middle of that blizzard, Kate, being the one that weren't no smarter than the other ones was, or maybe just struck stupid with love, whatever it was, she helped the Biddle boys just to saw through their bars. Apparently they couldn't even do that without help. Now, she even stole her husband's pistols to give to him. Talk about giving the old man the kiss off. Now, she burned and blasted every bridge or safety net that you had in that man plumb to kingdom come, and left him laying there in bed like he was a used up wad of charming. But I reckon it never occurred to her that the two slap nuts that had already used a gun to kill two people, and nothing was keeping them from making her number three. But the three of them slipped right out into the night where there was about a foot of snow on the ground with more pouring down. Now, if you're a world-famous criminal and you've just escaped jail and with the warden's wife, I reckon we all be thinking, what's our first move? Heck, I'd find me a hidey hole, crawl in, and pull the whole land after me. Or maybe go steal a fast horse and head for the border. Well, not this pack of geniuses. They jumped on a trolley car. No, folks, I ain't kidding. They hopped on a public streetcar. Nothing to see here. Just sitting on a trolley car with a woman wearing a jiding Victorian hat, and two guys in striped jail suits with guns stuffed in their underpants, looking like they just crawled up out of a sewer. It finally dawned on the turd flickers that the cops might just check the bus schedule. So they jumped off the trolley and finally got around to stealing a horse and what they call a light cutter, which is a small horse-drawn sleigh. They lit out north toward Butler County, thinking they could just maybe go out and hide in the woods. Now they're on a sleigh in a blizzard with near zero visibility, so they're moving along about as fast as a three-legged turtle with a limp. Going to hide in the woods with no coats, probably soaked to the bone with their clothes starting to freeze to their skin, with no way to start a fire, and the fire wouldn't burn if they could. Now, if it didn't take the police too long, I guess, to catch up to them near a place called Mount Chestnut, once the guy they stole the horse and sleigh from enlightened the police as to what was going on and who was going in what direction, well, the Biddle boys, showing that classic slick timing and quick brilliance they were known for, decided their best course of action was, well, just to piss on the fire, call in the dogs, and call it a night and give on up, right? Not a chance in hell. Well, they decided to shoot their way out. 2 6-guns against a posse of loaded long guns, and I reckon they didn't do too good in math class either from the results of this. The shootout lasted about as long as it took to sneeze. Jack and Ed were riddled with bullets before they hit the ground and could squeeze off a single shot. Kate, well, she realized her happily ever after was flopping around on the ground, looking like a heap of raw hamburger and bleeding out in the snow. Well, she decided that they wasn't leaving the party without her, so she pounces down, snatches up one of them hog legs, pops herself in the chest, and flops out right beside them, and both of them right in the snow there. So, but in keeping with the theme of can't do anything right, she was about as good at offing herself as the boys were at robbery. She missed every one of her major blood vessels and organs, and just gave herself a really expensive wound with a nice scar to boot. Seems to me that if she was serious about it, she could have pointed that peacemaker at the posse, and they'd have probably obliged her just like it did the other two morons that she could have been doing the death roll boogie right there with them in the snow. But she didn't hit the snow. She just kind of flopped down there and did a good bit of twitching and flopping herself before the police scooped them all up and hauled them to the hospital. Now, the Biddle boys managed to do the death twitch all the way to the hospital, but died a couple of days later. Now, you'd think that would be enough, but the irony didn't stop there. If you thought the jailbreak was a circus, wait till you hear about what happened next. Now, the funeral was a spectacle that'd make a social influencer blush with envy. It's a kind of story that makes you realize that a common sense packed its shit and headed for the hills a long time ago. Now, most folks, when they die after a shootout following a jailbreak, get a quiet hole and maybe rest in peace if they're lucky. But not Jack and Ed Biddle. No, these two were treated like they'd just discovered the cure for freaking cancer, but they didn't have the brains of a freaking ice cube and managed to bleed out in the snowbank for their final encore. But when the bodies were brought back to the morgue in Pittsburgh, the city went completely over the deep end. And we're talking about 10,000 people. Pretty much all of them were women swarming the streets. They weren't there to protest. They were there to pay respects to their fallen heroes. Now, the crowds were so big that the police had to turn fire hoses on them to keep the women away from the coffins. Don't even ask me why people fall in love with killers, but heck, it happens to this day. They brought so many flowers to the morgue that it started smelling like a botanical garden with a hint of formaldehyde. Police had to call in reinforcements because these ladies were trying to snip locks of hair off the boys' heads as souvenirs. Imagine that. You're a grown-ass woman with a house to run and a husband at the mill, and you're fighting a policeman for a piece of a dead man's hair. I've seen some odd, strange, and just plain weird things to holler where I come from, but this is a special kind of touched. One woman ran up and tried to jump directly in the casket with Ed, screaming that they were united in spirit. The coroner finally had to lock the doors, then had the gall to stand outside there and address the crowd, literally telling the women to go home and wash their dishes. Of all the things to say wrong, but I reckon it might have been the first time a true crime convention took place in American history, and it was held over the cooling corpses of a couple of dunces. But Kate Stoffel, well, she ended up surviving. While the Biddle boys were being tucked into the dirt, she was being walked up waking up in the hospital bed, probably wishing she was a better shot. She had a bullet hole in her chest and a mountain of legal trouble that not even the governor could help her with. The trial started in 1902, and it was the hottest ticket in town. Kate's defense was a master class, and it wasn't my fault. The moon was in the wrong house, or something along them lines. Her lawyers didn't try to deny that she gave them the saws. They claimed that she was hypnotized. They said that Ed Biddle had mystic powers and used his magnetic eyes to cast a spell over poor fragile Kate. They painted her up as a victim of a criminal Svengali, and it was a typical move to play in the Victorian area. Women were basically seen as emotional weather vanes that could be blown over by a strong breeze or a handsome face back then. The prosecution had their letters, which she'd written, and they were more scandalous than the Sears and Roebuck catalog with the underwear page tore out. And she wrote about her burning love and how she'd follow him to the gates of hell. It's hard to claim that you're hypnotized when you're writing poetry about a man's jawline at 2 o'clock in the morning. The jury didn't buy the voodoo defense. They found her guilty of aiding and escape, but because she was a woman and the wife of a respectable man, they went easy on her. At least that's what they said the reasons was. Now, she got 2 years in the Western Penitentiary. Now, while she was behind bars, her husband Peter, who, let's be pretty honest with each other here, had probably deserved a medal for not coming plumb unglued, divorced her and took the kids. Kate came out of prison as a pariah. She ended up living in a tiny room, working as a seamstress, and still clutching a picture of Ed Biddle like it was her holy relic. She spent the rest of her life telling everybody that Ed Biddle loved her, and they smiled, nodded, while they laughed at her behind her back. She died in 1909, alone and broken, with nothing but her scar and Ed's picture on her nightstand, but she was still famous. They even made a silent movie about her later on, because if there's one thing Americans love more than a hero, it's a woman who ruins her life for a man who wouldn't give her the time of day if she wasn't holding a hacksaw and he being in jail. In the end, the Biddle boys and Kate Stoffel left behind dead bodies, broken hearts, and a public that was more interested in the romance than the reality that proves that not even the big city, a heap of poor choices, and high drama can catch up to you. Now, the Biddle boys were buried in a plot where their headstones were repeatedly stolen by fans. Even in death, they couldn't find a place to hide out. So, what did we learn today? We learned that being handsome is a great way to get flowers, but an awful way to dodge a bullet. And if you're going to escape from jail, maybe don't do it in a blizzard or bring a warden's wife on a public bus with a big, huge hat on her head. I hope you got something out of our story today. If you did, please rate and review the podcast. Or if you're watching on Spotify, YouTube, or Rumble, throw us a like. And don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you watch or listen. Come on over to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, or Legend podcast group on Facebook, where we talk Appalachian or about anything else you want to talk about. I'll be back real soon with another Appalachian Murder, Mystery, or Legend, and I will see you then.